In this video, I'm going to share with you the tools that I use to design e-learning and instructional design projects for my clients. I hope you stick around to the end to make sure that you see all of the tools. Maybe some you'll be introduced to that are new to you. Some maybe you'll reawaken and I'll convince you to use them again. And in the meantime, make sure you subscribe and like. If you enjoyed this content, let me know. It lets me know if this is something that you want me to continue doing for you. So first off, let's start with an awesome tool, which I love. Canva, and I'm going to say that probably about all the tools that I use. So Canva is a web-based, basically think of Photoshop, but very, very, very simple. It's fantastic. And actually I found people who have been Photoshop diehards all their lives. They've actually gone to Canva and are now able to basically accomplish everything that they need to in Canva. And here's something that it can do. You have a huge repository of static graphics, fonts, and also stock footage that you can use in explainer videos, that you can use to augment current video, that you can use to create infographics, anything you want to. Basically, Canva can do it for you. So it also is a monthly subscription. So if you need it just for a month, which you probably actually get hooked on using it because it's so simple and intuitive to use, you probably end up just purchasing it. So I suggest that if you're not using Canva, check it out on a free trial and then just, ditch Photoshop and start using this because it'll save you time. All right, second one. Otter. So Otter is a transcription service. And what I love about Otter is the accuracy of the transcription service. Now, when I talk to practitioners, when I discuss things with subject matter experts, one of the things that I always do is record those meetings because I know that I lose so much of what is discussed when I don't actually record the sessions, because if I'm thinking about something or writing it down, I actually lose what they said and I lose the nuance and I lose the language, the specific way they said something, which is so useful when you're designing scenarios, right? So Otter is fantastic. I've tried other ones. I've tried Rev, I've tried Temi, I've tried Descript, and I found that Otter is probably the best AI as far as like instant transcription, probably one of the best. I'm sure there's more out there, but for me, Otter absolutely works and I absolutely recommend it. And also, I believe it is a month subscription as well. So if you just need it for a project, you can just get it for that month and boom, you're ready to go. Next up, Notion. So Notion it's kind of like a project management, awesome repository, anything you want it to be kind of tool. And that kind of makes it almost hard to use in some ways because it comes as a blank slate. What's fabulous with Notion is that there's a plethora of users out there who are super passionate about it and have developed all these fabulous not only tutorials, but also templates that you can use for absolutely free. Now Notion for me is how I've used it, and very effectively so, is as a hub per project. So not only does it allow you to kind of integrate a calendar and minutes and resources and notes and tasks and to-dos and everything all in one space, but it allows you to basically do that while sharing it with other people, and that the sharing of that space can be very granular. So people know you share that page and whatever you want them to see, they see. Whatever you want to keep private stays private. So Notion is very cool because it comes as a blank slate, so you can customize it to every project. I would suggest you create a kind of a project page and then start using Notion that way as far as creating a template for yourself of how you're going to manage projects every time. But it is a fabulous tool. I think it's completely underrated. I think it comes, there's free, but it also comes with a very small monthly fee. I think it's like $6 to use it, and it is absolutely worth it. Although it does take a little bit of education and ramp up time to kind of customize the space to what you need. But as far as I'm concerned, it is absolutely worth it. So I hope you check out Notion.io. Basecamp. Now, Basecamp, I would not use if I'm using Notion, or I would not use Notion if I'm using Basecamp. Basically, those two kind of do the same things, but Basecamp is a little bit more structured, where it actually gives you the elements already prefabbed and they kind of show you project spaces. That doesn't mean you can't customize those spaces. And I find Basecamp has a lot of features that are just kind of intuitively built for collaboration on projects. So if you haven't checked out Basecamp before, they give you a free project, as far as I'm concerned, a project area. I think they still do. And then you just get to play and see what a real project plays out. And I find also that Basecamp is very intuitive as well for people to use, especially if you're bringing people on that haven't been in that kind of area before. Basecamp has set it up so that they can just work from their emails. They never actually have to work in the Basecamp site. They can just work exactly right, like most people do, just out of their mailbox, which for a lot of people, if you don't want to have to kind of onboard them, is beautiful. So Basecamp is another alternative if Notion is kind of not your thing. All right, so check out both though, because the strategies that you learn in Basecamp, you can borrow into Notion and vice versa. Ready for the next one? Lucidchart. So I know there's a lot of chart making software out there, and that's what Lucidchart is, and it costs money and everybody's going for the free version, but I think you get what you pay for. So with Lucidchart, what I love is the crisp and clean, beautiful output that you get with that software. So one of the things that I do with my partner is I design interactive stories and scenario-based experiences. And what I find is that it is actually really helpful to map those experiences out, especially when you're designing complex branching scenarios. I find that to me it's actually a really nice output. And I find that it's easy for me to chart it out in that software. I know other people use other software like Twine and things like that, but for me, Lucidchart, the output, the way that it works, I've just gotten so used to it that I find it now, it's the way I graph, and I find it very intuitive and very clean. And so also one of the things that it does is it allows you to use different elements for different pieces. So if you want to create beautiful infographics, if you wanted to create really good decision flow charts, all those things, Lucidchart will allow you to do that. And I think it's 100% worth it because of the output. Next one. Calendly. I cannot say enough about Calendly. So I work with people all over the world, subject matter experts all over the world, practitioners all over the world. And one of the things that I found is that the hardest thing to do is schedule time with people. It's so hard. So what I do is I use Calendly to augment my Google Calendar, and I actually integrate it with Zoom as well. And so what happens is somebody needs to book a time with me, I make that time available. I can even set up a specific event which allows me to set certain times for them. Like, let's say I'm working with a subject matter expert who is only available in the evenings and the weekends. Well, I can create a special Calendly event which only allows those evenings and weekends to be booked for just that person, so that nobody else can see that and book themselves in on a Sunday. But that person can, because I really need to make sure that I can be flexible for their schedule, because maybe they're on the other side of the world, like in South Africa, or some other times like in Hong Kong, where it just makes sense for me to be a little bit more accommodating than just the regular 9 to 5. So I send them a link, it works beautifully, and I've used Calendly internationally, and it works seamlessly. It is definitely, I think there's a monthly fee, and you can go for the annual. I feel like even if you're working for an organization, it's worth to make the investment in Calendly because of the time it will save you with your colleagues booking meetings, unless you're using something like Outlook. But I never even found those apps as intuitive for booking meetings and for setting up a custom schedule so that somebody can find the time that works for them. Nothing else compares. And there are other tools which are very similar. For me, Calendly is the one that I've started using, and I now know how to use it, and it works. So it's fantastic. I highly recommend it to augment your schedule. Next up is Loom. Loom is, I think many people know about Loom these days, but I think it's just a fantastic tool. What it allows you to do basically is just a screen share with your face there in the corner. and it's quick and easy, and there's basically little ramp up time. And all of the tools that I'm talking, except with maybe the exception of Lucidchart, are very easy and intuitive to use right away. Lucidchart just takes a little bit more getting used to. So with Loom, what I find is what's cool is you can create that video, creates a custom link, and you can send that directly to somebody and say, here, watch this, check this out. I've used it personally with when I'm working on projects. I like to talk through things, and I feel that it's very important for people to also see my face when I'm talking to them. It's a way for you to introduce yourself to subject matter experts while walking through a project plan, let's say, or something like that. So it's a fabulous tool for integrating your face and a software. It works really easily. It allows you to even see and track on the back end how many people, if people actually watched it. It allows them to give feedback on your video and ask questions. And it's also very private. So many benefits. And it's also super affordable. So I feel like that's another tool that's should be in your toolkit. You should be using it, and you should not feel bad about spending money on it, because it is also 100% worth it. This one is full. So I love G Suite. I'm a Google user. I know some organizations don't want you to use that stuff, but if you work for yourself, you get to choose what you get to work with, which is fantastic. And one of the things that I love about these docs, forms, and the presenter, which is basically all versions of Microsoft Office products with web-based version, is that they allow you to share and collaborate. One of the things that I think is a really cool feature is that you're able to share something like a Google Doc with somebody, and then make that, and then later shut down that ability, so that you turn a link on so that somebody can see. You can be very granular whether you want them to share, how you want them to see that document, whether you want them to comment on it, whether you want them to edit it, whether you want them to just view it alone. And then later you can actually take that link and turn it off so that nobody can access that document again. And so I love the granularity with which you can share these documents, and the permissions that you can give also allow you to really have full control of how that document is disseminated, how that document is later accessed. All those things make Google Docs for me a fantastic tool. And there are things that you will find in Word that are not in Google Docs, but I think that those things are just the reason some of those features exist is because collaboration and sharing and version control and all those things have not been intuitively built into Word, because it didn't start out as a web-based platform, but it has been in Google Docs. The other piece is Forms. I think Forms is totally underused. I find the Forms is basically, you can create a survey, you can create a quick quiz. It accumulates the data for you on the back end. You can disseminate it pretty quickly. There are other tools that I've used for creating forms and quizzes, which are for pay and also are much more intuitive. But I find Forms out of the box is really quite useful. You can quickly create very intuitive and beautiful looking surveys and forms and share them out. So I suggest you check it out, at least just to see its capabilities, because it is actually just awesome. All right. And the last one is Presenter, which is basically a Google version of PowerPoint. It's fantastic, comes with its own templates, very easy and intuitive to use. And if you know how to use PowerPoint, you will know how to use Google Presenter. Those two actually, to me, align almost perfectly. The only difference is that now Google has a lot of these cool things where they have all these add-ons all onto these apps, especially the Google Presenter, where you can add graphics, you can add logos, you can add all kinds of fancy templates. So there is, and even interactivity. So that world, I do not ignore it. Learn how to use those sharing features and how to turn them on and off. They will save you so much time. I find like it's an indispensable tool for me now. Now, next one, another indispensable tool, of course, is Zoom. I couldn't leave it out, right? It's something that I use all the time. I use it for big meetings, personal meetings. I use the recording feature, and also its simplicity. It is very simple. And one of the things that I found, the reason I mentioned Zoom is I used to use Skype, but Zoom I found on international levels that it's very stable on mobile. People have a very easy time getting it on their either their phone or their computer. I found that even when I'm working with people relatives that are not tech savvy, they've actually found it easier to download something like Zoom than actually use Skype, which has all these updates and things like that. So one of the things that I found is also that Zoom, if you set up things on the back end very well, you can hand meetings off and things like that, and give people permissions to run those meetings. So I just find it simple, intuitive, and a great tool. I know a lot of people use Microsoft Teams, and that's cool. It really comes down to the tools that you find that you will use the most, because it doesn't really matter if we get you a journal, if we get you something else. It doesn't matter how sexy it is. If you don't use it, then it loses its value. Now, here's another thing. Now, I'm going to mention the tools I'm mentioning is because I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by the tools, and that's not at all. I should have said that at the beginning of the video, is that's not the point of this video, is to make the tools overwhelming to you and think, oh my gosh, all these things I have to learn. But I want you to know that all of these tools are very intuitive, but there are things that I use on my projects, and almost every single project that I do includes the use of all these tools. And so if you're trying to get into instructional design, or if you are developing trying to develop like a lean repertoire of tools that you'll need because you want to become independent, I just want you to know what it is you need to have in your back pocket in order to be able to actually produce projects for clients, especially if you're an end-to-end development shop like I run. Now, the other thing you should be familiar with as well is an LMS. Now, I don't manage an LMS. I rarely get to, as an independent contractor and consultant, I rarely get to dabble in that world. However, knowing how an LMS, which is a learning management system, works is important, because you need to know how things are going to report, how things are going to integrate with the current workflow of when learning is assigned to people, the data you're going to get, all those things you kind of need to understand. So what I suggest is that you get into some simple LMSs that are free if you don't have access to a big one, and just check out to see what the possibilities are so that you can start asking questions when you're having your projects on, what's possible. My favorite LMS is, you can start with something as simple and easy as Teachable. Teachable is like a simple LMS, minimal reporting features, but it allows you to see kind of like what that looks like on the back end. Another one you can check out is Moodle. I find Moodle, though, is really bloated with complexity, because Moodle, what it's supposed to be, is modified by the institution to suit their particular needs. So if you get into a Moodle like as it is, there's a lot in there. But I feel like once you get into one LMS and you kind of understand the gist of it, and there's tons of tutorials on different kinds, then there are certain things that they all really do the same way. It's just that the wrapping kind of changes, and then the customization packages change, and what kind of reports you can get. One of the things I suggest with an LMS also is just talking to somebody who's really deep into them, because there are a lot of LMS experts, especially in an institution. They usually have somebody who is like dedicated to that task. So talk to that person to see what's possible, and then you'll know. But I suggest getting comfortable with at least one, so that that skill is transferable. Articulate 360. So Articulate has a couple of products, actually multiple products, but as far as publishing goes, it has Articulate Storyline and it has Articulate Rise. And both of those I find are essential, especially if you're developing for a gamut of different clients. And so Articulate Storyline is very much for custom development work. And then also, I mean, you could set up templates and things like that to make sure that you are productizing your services, because it's very important, especially if you want to be able to deliver several projects to several customers all at the same time and not go crazy. And then the other piece is that Articulate Rise. And Articulate Rise I find is fantastic if you are developing information that should be consumed, something like scrolling on a phone or something like that. That is fantastic for that simplicity. And really out of the box, Rise is like so easy to use. Like basically, if you know how to use Word, you'll know how to use Rise. And so when people are like, "Oh, I'm a Rise developer," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's like saying you're a Word developer." Like those things are really, I'm sure there's levels to this, but I've used it and it's so intuitive. Rise is great for basically information dumps and making sure that those are easy to read and accessible online. And then Articulate Storyline is where you develop the more complex online learning with deep engagement. If you're designing scenarios, if you're designing things that are custom, that are engaging, that have custom interactions, that's what you'd be using Articulate Storyline for. The other tool that I think is fantastic is Vyond. Now, when you talk about Articulate Storyline, I talked about Storyline and Rise. And Rise is very, very intuitive, and Articulate there's a little bit of a learning curve there. Now, Vyond is, as far as a learning curve, it's very, very low. There's a lot of great tutorials online as well. But what I find is once you learn something like Vyond, and you learn how timelines work on video and how timelines work in a software like Vyond, because it's there to help you create explainer videos, or it's there to help you basically export short videos that you can then integrate into a storyline file. But what Vyond does is the way that it's set up is very much there's a big overlay with how Articulate works as well as far as timelines go. So what I find is that once you get pretty savvy with one tool, the next kind of comes way more easier because you get to stack on those skills. And all of these most of them actually, all of them are web-based, which is fantastic because you get to accept Articulate Storyline. They haven't done that yet. When are they going to do that? Who knows? Still waiting on that. So Articulate Storyline is the only tool that is not web-based yet. All right, so I hope you found these tools helpful for you. In the context of how I use them, I have a video that I created that has to do with the work that I do every single week. And I split up my week into specific days. And in order to help me minimize decision fatigue, help me focus, and also help me keep on track and get the most momentum out of the time that I actually have. So if you want to see how I would use these tools in a project context and on which days, that video might be helpful for you to choose. So I'll make sure to link to it in this video. Otherwise, I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. And if you have questions about becoming somebody who does this as a freelance consultant, who is building their own business and who wants to maybe transition to become an instructional designer who does consulting in a freelance, I'll put a link underneath the video. You can schedule a session, one of the free strategy sessions with my team, and then you can come on the call and ask some questions about whether this is the right direction and the right career for you. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye, friends.